become a widow or widower, you gain back the half you lose at marriage. They can't take it where they're going. You can't say, well, I'm dying, you gotta come with me. No, you go by yourself. Right? I'm not coming with you. Right? The surviving spouse gets the whole estate in severalty. That means it's theirs forever. And that's the reason we use these words. Till death do us part. And if you want to depart before death, well, you become a tenant in common.
This sign that date.
Well, that's something different. You go and speak to an attorney. So, divorce, it becomes a tenancy in common. So know the difference between this survivorship and survivorship in joint. Joint means it must be part of the deed. Here is automatic. Once you say tenancy by the entirety, it's a husband and wife type of ownership, and survivorship is implied. That means each spouse basically has 100% ownership of the estate. And they have to do it together. They don't want to sell. And if one spouse passes away, the other spouse automatically gets the total estate. And that's why survivorship doesn't have to be the deed. So these are the co-ownership. Ownership means two or more individuals have ownership of the same estate. In common, the unities are same or different. Joint and by the entireties, the unities are the same. Parties, two or more individuals, joint and in common. Entireties, only husband and wife. Must be legally married. There's no survivorship in tenancy in common. You have the right of inheritability. Their survivorship must be the deed when it comes to joint estate. And survivorship is implied when it comes to tenancy by the entireties. Very difficult to understand in the exam questions they'll pose to you. Then we have the non-freehold estate. The non-freehold estate is an estate for a known duration. And the only one has a known duration is called an estate for years. And the estate for years is an estate that is created by a signed lease. The lease creates the estate. And the parties to a lease are the lessor, know the parties, and the lessee. The lessor is the landlord. The lessee is the tenant. So what the lessor is given to the lessee is the right to possess, the right to use, and the right to enjoy. That's what the landlord conveys to the tenant by way of a lease. That's why it's a legal document. The landlord is conveying these property rights. The only thing the landlord retains is the right of disposition. The tenant doesn't have that right. That's why the lease survives the sale of the property. The lease survives the sale. So when the landlord sells the property, the new owner has to recognize the tenant's lease, because the new owner did not get the right of possession and use and enjoyment. That's still with the tenant. That's why when we buy these types of properties and they have a tenant there, we have to make sure that the tenant's rights are recognized, because the tenant have those rights. And the only time the tenant give up those rights is when the lease expires. That means they have a definite timeline, and definite starting date, definite ending date, where the tenant has a leasehold estate and the landlord has a reversionary estate. Reversionary means when the lease expires, those rights that the tenant has revert back to the landlord. Those rights of possession, use, and enjoyment goes back to the landlord. The landlord gets it back at the end of the lease. That's why the lease has a definite expiration date. And when that date comes about, tenant has to leave unless the landlord dictates otherwise. Then we have a tenancy at will. Tenancy at will, there's no definite term. At will means that the owner or landlord gives the tenant the right to possess, use, and enjoy. You have the right to use, enjoy, and possess. The landlord tells the tenant. We have no written document. They have no definite term. And therefore, either one must give the other proper legal notice when they want to terminate. Proper legal notice must be given because there's no definite term. And the proper legal notice, the time for giving that is dependent on how the rent is paid. The most two common ones are if the rent is paid weekly, there's a 7-day notice is required. If the rent is paid monthly, there's a 15-day notice is required. Those are the only two popular ones we have. They have quarterly and they have annually, but those are the two. The most common is monthly. So if the rent is paid monthly on this type of estate, one has 15 days to terminate. So the landlord can give the tenant 15 days notice, or the tenant can give the landlord 15 days notice, because there is no definite time in that arrangement. There is no signed document. So, legal notice is required. In a lease, no legal notice is required, because the time expired. Rights revert back to the owner. So if the lease expires, and the rights have reverted back to the owner, and the tenant is still in possession of the property, because they haven't given up possession, then they have a tenancy of sufferance. A tenancy of sufferance means, in law, they have naked possession. Not to give up, but let's tell you what it means. Naked possession means that legal possession went back to the owner, and that's reversionary estate. But the tenant is still in physical possession of the property. That's why it's called naked possession. And seeing that the tenant is in physical possession of the property, the only way the landlord can get back physical possession is by going where? Going to court. And that's why the landlord goes to court and files for a writ of possession. And the court will grant the landlord that writ. And the writ will be served by a sheriff, an officer of the court, not the landlord serving the writ. The officer of the court goes and serves the writ on the tenant. So look, you have to give up physical possession within 24 hours, because this is a court order. And if you don't, then you are trespassing. And then I can charge you legally, criminally. That's what the sheriff can do. You have notice, you have a 24-hour notice to give up physical possession. Take out all your property, whatever you have to take out, and leave the premises. And if you don't leave it in 24 hours, I'll come back here and charge you with trespassing. That's what the sheriff can do. Because the sheriff can't charge him with trespassing because they still have physical possession. And they're not evicted as yet. The court says you have 24 hours to leave. Here's the order. And I come back here in 24 hours, and you're still here, well, now I can arrest you. I can't arrest you now, because the law says you still have physical possession of the property. And that's how it works. People didn't know that. The sheriff doesn't evict. The court evicts. The sheriff just serves the notice. Yeah, well, charge you trespassing. Yeah, of course. Yeah, because you're not supposed to be there. So, tenancy of sufferance is renting without the definite term, without the landlord's agreement. That means one is trespassing, but they have physical possession. And the only entity can give back the landlord physical possession of the property is if the tenant moves out, or the court tosses them out. The landlord cannot physically toss them out. These are the complications of law when you become a landlord or tenant. So these are they called the non-freehold estates. Then we have one's constitutional homestead. Homestead law gives the homeowner certain rights and certain benefits. And one of the benefits the homeowner has by declaring the home, their constitutional homestead, is protected from forced sale, for deaths of the family, for certain liens, not all liens. There are only certain liens that the homestead is protected from, and certain liens they're not. Then they have the homestead tax exemption benefit. But you have to apply for it. We did a mathematical concept on Friday. Then if one dies with or without a will, they have descent of homestead or devise of homestead. I don't have the devise here, I'll put it on. The rules are the same. If one doesn't have a will or one has a will, homestead law overrides a will. Homestead law overrides a will. The homestead goes to the spouse. Can't make it part of a will. Overrides the will. People didn't know that. You can't leave your home according to your will. Though you have the right to will, but in the state of Florida, you have homestead rights. And it's very complicated sometimes. So when it comes to protection from forced sale, there is no foreclosure for judgment liens except. And these are the liens one's homestead is not protected from. And these liens are specific to the property. And that's the reason it's not protected from. Liens that are specific to the property. Now, what's the most specific lien you have in your property? Property taxes. It's specific to the property. Property taxes are on the property. Therefore, if the taxes are not paid, the county has the right to go and sell the property in a tax deed sale. Special assessment liens, specific to the property. That means that they need the money. Then you have the mortgage lien, because the home was pledged to the lender as security for the note. And therefore, if one is defaulting on the note, the lender has the legal right to go and force the sale, because the homeowner gave the lender the right to do so by way of a mortgage. And therefore, the lender goes to court and asks the court to enforce the sale. Then we have your vendor's lien, called seller financing. If the seller take back a purchase money mortgage and the buyer is in default, well, the seller can go to court and ask the court to close the sale to get the money. Then the construction lien. The general contractor have improved the home. And under the general contractor's law, they have the right to put a lien on the property. And if the lien is not paid, the general contractor's services are not paid, they have the right to foreclose. And in certain cases, the Internal Revenue Service, not for income taxes. Income taxes are personal. It's only for estate taxes. Estate taxes means the owner is deceased, and if one dies, one still owes the taxman. You're not going where you're going without sending your tax bill. So the taxman has the right to look at what you have in terms of assets, and if this is one of your assets, they will go and force the sale to get the money. So these are the liens that are considered to be specific, and they can force the sale. But other liens, the homestead law protects it. They have to wait until one does find something financially, and then they can get the money. These, they can force the sale. Then we have entitled to homestead tax exemption. We did that on Friday mathematically, but one has to file for it. One has to own their home, right, in January 1 of the tax year, and one has to file between January 1 and March 1st on the first year of filing, on the first year of ownership, and they'll get the basic benefit of $5,000. One has to continue to file every year to get the exemption. And people say, well, don't file every year. Yes, you do. You file every year, because what the county does is send the homeowner a card. And the card says that if there's any changes, make the appropriate changes on the card and send it back to the county. Well, if there's no changes, the county sends in a card that will continue to offer you the same exemptions as the previous year. So that's called filing. If one does nothing with the card, it's still filing. So if the question, like the exam question is going to ask you, do you need to file for your homestead tax exemption every year? And the answer is yes, you have to. You have to file it every year. And the filing time is between January 1 and March 1st. In some counties, they have year-round filing. But that is the basic time. January 1, March 1st. Then there's devise and descent of homestead. Devise means one dies without a will. Descent means one dies with a will. Put devise here. So devise means one dies with a will. Descent means one dies without a will. One cannot make the home part of the will. It goes to the spouse. The home goes to the spouse. So, if the home is owned in severalty before marriage, and one gets married, it becomes the homestead of the spouse. The spouse have a constitutional right to the home. And that's the reason you can't sell your homestead without consulting your spouse. Your spouse have to sign off on the sale. And that's a complication sometimes. And that's the reason why you seek an attorney's advice. When you will get married, you own your home, go and seek an attorney's advice before you say I do. Because once you say I do, mi casa becomes su casa. Yeah. With a will. Devise means with a will. Descent means without a will. So, constitutional homestead. No linear descendants. The spouse gets the estate in fee. Linear descendants means linear to the spouse that owns the home. The spouse gets a life estate. The spouse that has no ownership, no legal ownership, gets a life estate. And the linear descendants becomes vested remitterment. That means the kids, or all the children related to the deceased spouse, they become vested remitterment. And that's homestead law. And that's the reason you seek an attorney's advice when you own home with your spouse. Make sure you understand. We can't practice law. So when you're out there practicing real estate services, and they ask you the question, how do I take ownership? The first words in your recommendation is, seek an attorney's advice. Let the attorney explain to you what the complications are when you own your home. And or don't get married. Live together. You don't recognize common law marriages in the state. And if you're living together before the February of 2016, they're gonna put you in jail for that too. A lot of people didn't know that, right? You guys didn't know that? Elective share. Surprise! A lot of people broke the law. They didn't know they were breaking the law by living together. Elective share, 1976. The state of Florida decided to change the law when it comes to deceased spouse's estate. We used to have dower rights and courtesy rights. It was very complicated. Dower rights are rights to the female spouse when the male spouse passes away. Courtesy rights are rights to the male spouse when the female spouse passes away. So what the law says is that these are complicated rights. What is dower and what is courtesy? So in 1976, the state of Florida decided to change the law to make it very simple. And what the law said in 1976, if the surviving spouse does not like the will the deceased spouse left for them, they don't like what they got through the will, they can ask the court to set aside the will and award the elective share. So what elective share will give the spouse is, other than the homestead, the homestead always goes to the spouse. In homestead law, they will get 30% of the net value of all real and personal property the deceased spouse owns in the state of Florida. 30% the net value. They also get $10,000 worth of furniture and appliances where the deceased spouse was living. They'll get $1,000 worth of personal property, not part of a will, and they get all the automobiles. That's what they get. And it's called elective share. So the spouse can look at the will and say, do I get more to elective share, or do I just take what the will gives me? And that's why the law was changed to make it a little more simple in 1976, coming forward. Question, Widow McPhee found that her deceased husband left his entire estate except for homestead to the secretary. Well, I don't have to ask you which is the correct answer, right? Everybody in the classroom knows the correct answer. You know she's gonna go to ask the elective share. The secretary. Very hard-working secretary. More wisdom wise. Condominium. When one owns a condominium, one owns the airspace within the unit. That's what one owns. One does not own the walls, one doesn't own the floor, one doesn't own the ceiling. One has a tenancy in common with the rest of the other owners within the complex. And that's the reason these important documents must be reviewed when one is going to buy a condominium. And the most important of all is called the declaration. The declaration is the master deed. That's how the condominium was created. And once it's filed and recorded in the public records, now the condominium is formed. And the next important document is called the bylaws. How the corporation is going to run. What are the rules what are the laws of the corporation? Bylaws means that the corporation establishes a set of laws that each owner has to obey. And if you violate the law in the condominium corporation, in the condominium unit, you have consequences. You have fines and you have all these things that the association can assess against the unit owner. Then you have your unit deed that conveys actual ownership of the unit. And there is a map or survey that shows how the unit is sited in relation to other units in the complex. So everybody owns everybody's part of that complex. You only own the airspace within the unit. And that's the reason the association governs the whole complex. And that's the reason that you have to seek the association's approval when one wants to do something in the unit itself. Because the walls and the floors and the ceilings are owned in common with everybody else. And that's very important. Condominium owners understand their ownership. You only own the airspace. the heir within the unit. And you have an undivided interest with the remaining common areas within the unit and in everybody else's unit. You have a tenancy in common with everybody else's. A co-op, on the other hand, the corporation owns the real estate. The corporation owns the real estate, and the corporation sells shares. And one acquires shares. The shareholder has the right to get a lease to the unit. It's called a proprietary lease. A proprietary lease means it's a lease between the corporation as the landlord and the shareholder as the tenant. So when one acquires shares, one is entitled to get the lease that the shares is attached to the unit they are going to possess. And goes together. The shares and the lease goes together. So when one sells, one is going to sell shares and the lease goes to the new shareholder. So that's how everyone gets to use the unit, by selling the shares and the lease goes along with the sale. It's called a proprietary lease. A proprietary lease is a lease between the shareholder and the corporation. So you have to be a shareholder to get a proprietary lease. If you're not a shareholder, you can't get that lease. That's called a co-op. One owns shares, don't own a unit. In a condo, one has a unit deed for the unit. In a co-op, one has shares to the corporation and a lease to occupy, possess, and enjoy the unit. Say that there are complicated ownerships. The law gives the purchaser these rescissionary periods, and they can cancel the contract for any reason, provided it's within the rescissionary period. If one is buying a condominium or a co-op and is buying it from a developer, one has 15 days to cancel for any reason and get back the money. One is buying a timeshare. A timeshare is a condominium and the unit is converted into units of time and sold to individuals. So whatever timeline that individual owns in that unit, that document that grants them that right, well, they have 10 days to cancel the contract, either buying it from a developer or buying it from a private person. If one is buying a condo or a co-op from a private owner, one has 3 business days to cancel the contract. These are what we call rescissionary periods, and it's granted by law. It's not granted by the individuals. The law granted the purchaser these rights because they're complicated ownership, and one has to make sure you understand what they're buying into. If they don't like what they read, then they can walk away from the sale, get back the money. So let's go to the back of the book and let's look at some questions that pertains to this chapter. Question 276. Question 276. Mr. Reynolds, inspect a piece of property. He notes a pile of fencing that the seller tells him he had purchased with the intent of fencing in the yard, but has not gotten around to doing it yet. When Mr. Reynolds buys a house and takes occupancy, he finds that the fencing has not been installed and has been removed. Mr. Reynolds consults his lawyer, who advises him that gotta be B, right? Because it's still personal property. Therefore, the seller can remove the item. If it's attached, then it has to stay. But it's still personal because it was not installed. 277. Which tenancy exists when a tenant remains in possession of the property after the termination of lease without the landlord's agreement? Be a tenancy at sufferance. That means the rights have reverted back to the owner, but the tenant is still in possession of the owner's property. 278. Which of the following shares of real property will a widow with no children receive at her husband's death in the absence of a will? She gets all of it. She gets all of it. 279. What does personal property that is permanently attached to the land become? Becomes a fixture. 280. What type of estate is the most comprehensive? The simple estate, either in severalty, joint, in common, or by the entirety. They're all comprehensive estates. They're all comprehensive estates. 282. Which type of estate refers to the lessor's interest in leased property? Lessor landlord. Landlord has an estate in reversion. Those 282. The landlord has a reversionary estate on those rights the landlord grants to the tenant. 283. What do homestead rights provide? That'd be A, protection from negligence of the spouse. The inside was created by the spouse through negligence. Went out and incurred debt and got sued. 284. What is the name of the gradual buildup of sand on the riparian or littoral owner shoreline by natural causes? It's called accretion. It's called accretion. 285. If two or more persons have an undivided interest in real property, which estate cannot be created unless specific wording in the deed provides for the right of survivorship. A joint estate. You can't create a joint estate without those words. Survivorship. 286. Which type of interest in real property is created by a type of contractual agreement having all essential elements of a contract, plus a property's description and a definite term of tenancy? Answer is B, yes, leasehold. The document describing is called a lease. That's the document the question is describing. It's a contractual document between landlord, lessor, tenant, lessee. 287. 287 says Jim, Matt, and Jack were co-owners of a parcel of real property. Matt died, and his co-ownership passed according to his will to become part of his estate. What type of tenancy did Matt have? He was have it in common, because it goes according to his estate. 288. Which estate would not convey legal title? Yeah, estate for years. Estate for years, you have a leasehold interest, not a freehold interest in the property. 289. Which estate or tenancy shows an ownership interest in land? If you have it in common. If you have it in common, you own the land. If you have it for years or at will, you're just a tenant. You don't own the land. You're just a leasehold, have a leasehold interest. Question 507. Question 507. Frank and Harry own a property. Frank dies, and the property passes to Harry. How is the property held? A joint estate. Very good. Harry gets it. Hopefully, Frank didn't go hunting or fishing with Harry. 522. 522. So 522 says Janet has reached the end of her lease, and she stayed unable to reach the landlord, but she stayed in the property anyway. What type of tenancy does Janet have? Tenancy of sufferance. Question 559. Question 559. Tom, Brian, and Bill purchased an office building in fee simple. Which form of ownership would Tom's family prefer? A tenancy in common. The family who said one in common. They don't want to join, because a joint estate, it goes to his partners. The family says, I want to be part of the will. 572. 572 says, what is the name for the legal rights of the property owners whose land borders a river? Riparian rights. River, riparian. Question 612. Question 612 says, which of the following estates involves ownership of real property? Freehold estate. You own the property, the rest are leasehold estates. For years or at will, you don't own the property, you're just a tenant. Question 626. Question 626. Mary needs John a property for John's lifetime. Upon John's death, the property will transfer to Fred. What is Fred's interest in the property? Fred has a remainders estate. Question 717. Question 717. Which homeowner's right can keep someone off their property? It's called exclusion. That's the right to control who should come to your property. It's called the right of exclusion. Question 722. 722 says, Mr. and Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Jones's sister take title to duplex together. What type of tenancy have they formed?
Joint tenancy.
It's got to be a joint tenancy. That's the only one that makes sense. Can't be by the authorities. Not legally. In certain cultures, yes. In Utah, yeah. Question 743. Question 743. What property right does an individual have who owns a condominium unit? No, you have a freehold estate. You own the unit. But you have a tenancy in common with everybody else. You have a freehold estate. Proprietary lease is only for co-ops. Question 748. 748 says, trees growing on property are typically considered to be real. Trees are always real. They're always real. I think the guy who grows a marijuana plant. It's always real. That's the argument he makes in court every day. 760. 760. 3 members of a family purchase an office building without the right of survivorship. One dies. What type of estate do the remaining family members have? They are in common. They're still in common. Question 777. Daughter deeded property to her elderly mother with the stipulation that the property will return to the daughter upon the mother's death. What type of estate does the daughter possesses? Estate in reversion. Estate in reversion. Know the estate, or reversionary estate. Question 932. Question 932 says, what would cause a fixture to be converted into personal property? The act of severance. Severance makes it personal. Attachment makes it real. 742. Which process refers to signed deposits that build up on the shoreline as a result of accretion?
742.
742. 942 in fact, I'm sorry. My fault, 942. 942. What process refers to sand deposits that build up on the shoreline as a result of accretion? It's called alluvium. That's the process. 952. And 952 says, what term refers to the rights an owner has because their property is lakefront? All notarial rights. Notarial rights. Chapter 9, there are 7 questions in this chapter. And it has to do with this document called a lease. As we just talked about briefly. And what the lease does. Well, a lease is a legal document between the landlord, lessor, and the tenant lessee. Is where the landlord conveys an interest but not all ownership to the lessee or tenant. Landlord, lessor conveys an interest called a lease to the tenant lessee but not ownership. So being that it's a contract, a legal contract between the 2 parties, on the contract law, this can be assigned. There can be an assignment of lease, where the tenant is going to take all their rights and assign it to a third party. So the tenant now becomes the assignor here. A lease is between the lessor lessee. Lessor is the landlord. Lessee is the no the ors, no your e's. So when the tenant now is going to assign their rights to the lease, the tenant now becomes the assignor, which is the tenant, and it goes to an assignee, to the third party.
Not like in subdivision.
No, that's not subleasing, no. Assignee, all of it. Whatever rights the tenant gets from the landlord, the tenant turns around and assigns it to a third party. So the tenant becomes the assignor, the third party becomes the assignee. Subleasing is somewhat different. Subleasing is where the tenant now becomes the sublessor. Let's put it right on here. And the third party becomes a sublessee. Sub means under. So the tenant is taking part of the rights and giving it to a third party. Not all of the rights. If I'm giving all of my rights, I'm assigning it. If I'm just giving part of my rights, I'm just subleasing it. So those are concepts when it comes to leases. Assigning, subleasing. Very different. All of it, I'm assigning. Part of it, I'm subbing. And that's basically the concept you need to understand for the exam question. There are three types of leases. I only have two here. The third one here. Brokers, it's in your exam.
I think you just said example.
So we have the net lease. A net lease is where the tenant pays a base rent and the tenant pays the landlord's expenses. That's net. A gross lease is where the tenant pays a base rent and the landlord pays the expenses. That's gross. Percentage lease is where the tenant's rent is tied to the tenant's sales volume. Any lease that ties to the tenant's sales volume is called a percentage lease. So those are the three types of leases one will have on the exam. Either a net lease, a gross lease, or a percentage lease. So percentage is based on the business volume, where the landlord